Welcome, everybody, to Mud Flood Was Armageddon. Mud Flood was Armageddon. Don't let them tell you anything else unless they're willing to debate you in a fair and honest way. Welcome, Brother Randy. I've kind of vented to you. How you doing, brother?
Well, I probably had a better day than yours in comparison. Yeah.
I am in a mood.
Thank- Thanks for asking.
The Lord has put on my mind. First part here, until I make a motion or something, was going to be my introduction to tonight's video. And we'll get to the second part when we get to it. I don't want to talk about fake anything, but what else is everyone? I don't want to talk about fake anything, but what else is everyone not striving to live serving Christ? I talked about how they faked math, they faked science, they faked all the false flags too. And now the Lord has shown me how the unintended consequences of uranium that needs to be looked into. The Atomic Energy Commission, atoms for speech, atoms, not atom, atoms for speech, Operation Condor, uranium fever, a planned bubble for yellow cake. They didn't even know yellow cake was dangerous until 1956 when they were fake processing all those fake atomic bombs. They didn't realize they were setting up poisoning stations throughout the world that are toxic to this day. We're going to be looking at the Cotter Incorporated in Canyon City, right here in Chicago, and it is a still going on for a 2024 court date of like getting them to admit, hey, you made money off of this uranium thing for 80 years and then you just filed bankruptcy and it's over. And they're going like, well, the state of Colorado said it's okay. Whew. And that was it. And guess what? That started like 1958 was when the first known dangers of yellow cake were made known to the public, because that's when they were made known. Thank you, everyone. Montana, Luther, Stellar Twag, Marcella K. Paso. This is the second part. There are two types of people here on dry earth, and I scratched that out. I went back later and I scratched that out. I changed that sentence there. Two types of groups. At least you and everyone else, RJ. I told you to put on your thinking cap, didn't I? There's at least two types of groups. Wait, there's also two types of sinners in this world and the next. I'm thinking forgiven and unforgiven. One group is washed from their guilt because their hearts have been changed by a force over which they have nor had control of. When that heart has been changed, it was changed by that force in a biblically described chain of events that we will go over later. I will talk about that more related. Lord of the Force willing. Lord willing, I'll talk about him later. There remains the group of sinners whose heart has not been changed. Two groups, right or wrong, born again, mess with you, heard it all before, but I'm Paco sent to warn you so that you know there must be a twist in this plot. well, not really a twist, a change the word people to groups, because most are not trained to acknowledge that the spirit world is real. And we have a group of fallen angels right alongside us somewhere, right? And between 1/3 of the angels had been cast down to, well, here on earth, this flat earth nation. And only one group is really safe for eternity, save sinners and not fallen angels. And what's up with the other, our cherubims, angels? I mean, we don't know. But what do we know? Well, the reason, the purpose for the force to be found coming to this earth is answered in 1 John 3, verse 8, that the devil was sinning from the beginning, and that the reason the Son of God appeared was to deal with sin in heaven. The other group has been given gifts. That's us. We're the human group that has been changed. Our heart's been changed, and all of a sudden we've got gifts and talents for what? To glorify his name. And the other group is still left not knowing what they're doing. We have been given those gifts and talents for one reason: to glorify the life and the work and the resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ, who is the physical incarnation of that only create from nothing, the ex nihilo type creator force that identifies as a father figure that has got everything under control. And when I sit at his feet, I'm comforted knowing he certainly seems like he has everything under control. He's good. It's all going to work out. And if you think, well, those boo-hoo, you get a baby in Africa that maybe wasn't evil. The people of this world want nothing more than you to rabbit trail off on what the Bible doesn't say, doubt God, and be millstoned. You can trust in God and the scriptures. That's the way it goes. I started with something about an atomic bomb, right? Well, once again, welcome to Mud Flood Armageddon. Randy, I made a note here for myself. I'm supposed to have pulled up Romans chapter 8.
Yeah, you got me thinking on a few things with your
yeah, well, we're at the okay, take over, brother part. So if you're ready to go, just go ahead. I've said all I got. I got a few tabs here, but I do want to read.
a lot of it kind of hinges on that reset between the first two verses of chapter 1 Genesis.
Right. I think I did say. Did I say something about the two creations, or that?
Well, no, not so much. But there was.
Oh, I wanted to.
You, I guess, said enough where to be cast down out of heaven, where else are you going to end up? I mean,
after that little dust in the classroom today,
heaven and earth, that's about it. It's separated. Yeah, with the firmament, we understand the cosmology, but
I wanted to put that in there. But after I was telling you that about that dust up I had in the class today, and then that other guy just totally went. I mean, I was being, questioning. This other guy just went off on this professor, telling him he's the worst leader ever. After I got home, because I had woke up at 3:30 and I had some questions, so I was doing my homework and getting everything ready for today. And then the first teacher canceled class because she wanted to go get a COVID test. And then the second class just went completely nuts. Since I'd gotten, anyway, I had to take a nap around 2. I didn't think I'd sleep to 6, so I only had about an hour to write. And I wanted to put in there about the two creations, but it just didn't come up. So we're going to go on. I got to share the screen. to read that. I guess here's that order of salvation. I think it starts in verse 28. And we know that God works all things together for the good of those who love him. And I'm thinking in heaven and earth, who are called according to his purpose. For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his son, so that he would be the firstborn among many brothers, and the Bible teaches sisters. Those he predestined, those lost in their sins, whose hearts would be changed, he also called. And he called many, but not many were chosen. But that's not part of the chain here. Those that he called, the ones that make it, he also justified. Those he justified, he also glorified. And what can we say in response to these things? Well, that's what a lot of people are going to, what? Well, what can you say? And here's when I rest in my total comfort in between gangrene and whatever else the Lord I might have to suffer for, the backstabbery that has been documented by wolves in sheep's clothing who lie about Paul, me, Randy, and even each other. They lied about Tommy until Tommy started acting up. They are liars. They will kill you. They don't know what they're doing, but if it involves you getting in their way, they will kill you. They're not the good guys. In him we have this redemption through his blood, or we don't. The forgiveness of our trespasses or not. It is all based on the according of his riches and his grace, that for some reason he came down to earth to deal with sin in heaven, and along the way he lavished on us all wisdom and understanding. He made known to us the mystery of his will. Why? Well, it was his good pleasure to do so, and he purposed it to work through an incarnating of himself. And that's the fullness of time we live in. Otherwise, I wouldn't be living this life, because I earned enough money along the way to, by the age of 54, I could have lived by a golf course for the rest of my life, kicking ass on punks. Boy, I'm in a mood, Randy.
Sounds like.
Yeah, but that's all true. Because there are certain people that are called to do certain things, and they're not asked. I wasn't asked, hey, how about, living this life? It was like, we're shifting gears here, Alan, and we're moving on. And guess what? I'm not asking you to do something, I'm telling you. And it involved the Stones crying out. Somehow you got involved. And
go figure,
huh? Right. And I lived in Canyon City. You weren't that far from it. You didn't go through it or even close to it, but you weren't that far from it. The danger of the atomic fake was that they had to have the uranium and the testing and everything else, and they needed something to play with and play around with. And the reaction was Satan willing and ready to go, oh, use these rocks. Let's just try to catch up, see if this makes sense.
End to the Second World War. Powering that 15 kiloton atomic bomb was a relatively modest 64 kilograms of this stuff, uranium-235. The dropping of Little Boy on Hiroshima, as well as Fat Man on Nagasaki 2 days later, revealed to
What happened?
On August 6th, 1945, the United States dropped the first nuclear weapon ever used in warfare on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, killing up to 100.
That's the thing I want people, there might be some new people here, but most of the people that I've seen so far making comments know as much about this as most people in the world, and they'll be held accountable because now they're the new leaders that need to tell people, you know what? You got to question that whole atomic theory, the whole Nazis lost the war. They didn't merge with the United States. Oh, Hitler was making bombs. Japan was making bombs, but we did it first. It's all bullshit. So this was an excellent video for me to be led to by the father. Kind of intriguing so far, right, Randy?
Yeah, it looks like real footage.
Yeah.
150,000 people, and ushering in a swift, brutal, and highly controversial end to the
Better
Second
believe
World
it.
War.
Faked.
Powering that 15 kiloton atomic bomb was a relatively modest 64 kilograms of this stuff, uranium-235. The dropping of Little Boy on Hiroshima, as well as Fat Man on Nagasaki 2 days later, revealed to everyone on the planet, for the first time, the unfathomable power and destructive potential of nuclear energy.
Hey, Randy, you gotta. It's from there, look at that's their world. Look at their bomb going off. Woo.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's not all true.
Humanity collectively looked on in a mix of shock, disgust, and fear.
Shock, disgust, and fear.
But for some, the introduction of this new source of existential dread carried with it, paradoxically, hope and a new path for the future. And one of those measured optimists was the same man ultimately responsible for the first
What?
wartime use of the bomb. On August
Hey, what do you think about those guys, Randy? That I know that everybody watches other videos, and some of them you show me ones, and I like them, but they have the people that do all the numbers, and then some of the people they read into the names, and they go like, "Oh, do you think that?" Well, it's true that they do. Like John Carter, he's famous in the Edgar Rice Burroughs books, and a lot of heroes have the initials JC for Jesus Christ. And how would you like to get, be the man of like, I'm Harry Truman. I'm the true man here. It's kind of like everybody goes like, well, give him hell, Harry. Shit, dropped the bomb, didn't I? Killed a million people in one try. Give him hell, Harry. There might be something to that. I mean, I don't know. The Gematria seems like too much work.
1st, 1946, just a week shy of the 1-year anniversary of the first bombing,
What?
President Harry S. Truman
Oh, there
signed
it
into
is.
law the
I think we'll
Atomic
look at
Energy
that.
Act. The act established the Atomic Energy Commission, an independent civilian-run agency tasked with controlling and overseeing developments in atomic technology. For the first time, U.S. civilians had a hand in the nuclear
This isn't a
materials
very
industry,
long video
but in only a
that
few
we're going to look at here. But this is an important part here because this is a speech from this guy here. Everybody, geez, we were such suckers. I know I was. I believed he was trying to warn us about the military-industrial complex. It wasn't until, we really started digging, we found out about Operation PB Success, and this guy made a fortune off of the banana republics and all of that, cut off their hands. They're not picking enough bananas fast enough. We'll teach them a lesson they'll never forget. Well, here he is on this deal. And I'm going to just pause
Right.
I'm going to pause for a second, Randy.
Right.
This guy made his bones in the 1920s at the strike where the bonus army was trying to say, look, there's been a depression. You haven't paid us from World War I. We need our money. And Eisenhower and Patton were in charge of, hey, go break up that protest. And he did it. Ran World War II, got elected president, handed it off to the Irish mob. And then before he did that, he said, let's make money off uranium. They didn't know it was dangerous.
peaceful uses of uranium and calling on nations to create a centralized global stockpile of nuclear material in pursuit of a nuclear energy-focused future.
Or maybe he
It
did.
is not enough to take this weapon out of the hands of the soldiers. It must be put into the hands of those who will know how to strip its military casing and adapt it to the arts of peace.
Mm-hmm.
It is now known that Eisenhower's speech was part of a homeland propaganda campaign, codenamed Operation Candor, a polarizing and emotionally stirring campaign that drew both intense praise and equally intense criticism. Regardless of the ultimate motive, the campaign was, at least at the time, effective, and what became known as uranium fever took root.
You know what didn't take root, Randy?
Bad seed? I don't know.
Racism.
Oh, at that time.
Yeah, just like in every other mud flood truther, flat earth and whatever, it's all about they're picking on America. America would still be great with this and that. When America has always been the racist problem. None of this talk about from, 1978 until 1964, blacks can't vote. Until 1945, you couldn't even drink out of the same water fountain as a white person. And don't even think about being in the movies or making a record, you piece of shit. That was the established fact of the United States in our recent history that, in my mind, is ignored way too much or twisted to be, wow, we've helped them enough. And that's fake. But I want to stick mostly on our corporations are bad for just a little bit. Do you have any comments, Randy, or anything? What's jumping out to you?
Yeah, well, it just sounds like more fascism. I don't know.
Yeah, and that it's so recent, and the way they dressed. I mean, wow, how many? It's right there. Our recent history.
Was incorporated by 3 men out of Santa Fe, New Mexico. In one of their earliest public statements, Cotter announced they held claims to land in the vicinity of Canyon City, Colorado. While their original aim was to treat thorium mined and sent by rail from the Wet Mountains, a small mountain range in central southern Colorado, they quickly pivoted to uranium mining and milling after securing a contract with the Atomic Energy Commission, who had agreed to pay Cotter a set price of $8 per pound of concentrated uranium. 2 years after their incorporation, in April 1958, Cotter began rapid construction of the mill, just a few miles south of Canyon City, and completed.
Right. So now here's another one. They built this whole thing in less than a year. That's what they say. I guess they can build things in a hurry because, my dad was just getting into union electrician. They were allowing the, that socialism labor of people, you're going to pay us so much or we'll go on strike. And there was a time for about 20 years in this country where they said, you got it, boys. We'll pay you anything. We need this kind of stuff. All set up for a poisoned world right now at the end where judgment has been started. Here's just some of the ways they do it.
Bearing liquid then gets a dose of sodium hydroxide, which raises the pH and separates the uranium from the liquid solution. It's then dried, washed, and packed, resulting in yellow cake. While Cotter's uranium extraction and concentration process was a technical one, requiring scientific expertise and careful measurements, their waste disposal process was anything but.
Yeah, and again, their science at the time still believed the cell, the human cell is a simple cell. They didn't know nothing about no mitochondria, but they had everything figured out. And so there was yellow cake, just put not only here, but a lot of places around the world, and then it was covered up.
Regulatory Commission or the Environmental Protection Agency acting as the primary regulators. With all Superfunds, regulators have the authority under CERCLA to pursue the company or companies responsible for contamination, what they refer to as potentially responsible parties or PRPs, in order to pay for cleanups. And a PRP.
All right. So long story short, this guy, finds out that, these companies that are all working for Colorado, that this company never did anything right. Yet they kept getting their, license renewed by the state of Colorado there at,
Despite the increase in public pressure, Cotter remained undeterred in their quest to cut corners wherever they could, regardless of the effects their actions, or lack thereof, had on human health and the environment. And their lack of regard would become even more apparent in the years to come.
And so while you're this wonderful country that is worth fighting and dying for, is going on today around the world. There are sites like this where this world is not only being, waxed old like a garment, it's being poisoned by people that would rape your wife after they kill you and steal your food and eat your children. And we want to act like you should answer their questions like, well, your God seems mean. They're lying fakers, RJ. Listen to this next part.
Oh, right. Yeah. When you remove any consequences or for decision making. Yeah, you
So
got,
they what this company, Colorado Department of Health, did, they allowed this one company, CLL Incorporated, I think, to start a company and they paid them $150,000 for like a month for 10 years to guard the property because, they were a real estate service and they dealt in properties that were condemned, and they just watch out for them at the cost of $150,000 a month from a country that's 34 trillion in debt because they didn't care. They're going to burn it down anyway. Check out this little interview here.
Numerous toxic waste leaks that have occurred.
This is
over the
going
years.
on in
But this arrangement,
2024.
as bad as it looked
This
on the
is the bad
surface,
guy.
was about to
He
get
declared
even
bankruptcy. He
uglier.
doesn't know shit now.
Hi, everyone. Thank
Yeah.
you for being here tonight for our monthly CAG meeting. And we are going to have a departure from our normal agenda trajectory this evening. We have some news to share. And that news is that late last week, CLL informed EPA and CDPHE that the company was financially insolvent and would be unable to fulfill its obligations under the CERCLA RIFS AOC.
Did you see Miss Cunningham put her hand onto her mouth like Hillary when she saw Gaddafi get murdered?
And the radioactive materials license.
In February 2023, Harrington declared CLL insolvent, claiming they were unable to fulfill their obligations under CERCLA.
Guess what? Nobody's in trouble.
right. Big surprise? Maybe not.
Had another meeting.
Meeting with the Community Advisory Group, Assistant Attorney General Shelley Hickerson attempted to address the concerns. In the June 2023 meeting, Hickerson claimed that she understands the discomfort surrounding the circumstances of CLL's insolvency and
CLL, and given that CLL has a current notice of apparent violation against them, I'm confused as to why that's not perceived as a conflict of interest, and why that's not perceived as a problem.
So CLL and Ensero are two separate companies. And as I've said, the relationship between the two of them, the perception of the conflict of interest is not being denied, or the overlap there is not being denied.
I just want to make a comment that it seems that if a company changes its name because of a corporate merger, that they therefore slip out of responsibility for being part of the company which defaulted.
I might not be understanding that particular issue with respect to the first company that you mentioned that Ensero turned into, but I do know that CLL and Ensero are two separate corporate entities, although they do have a corporate officer in common.
Although they do have a corporate office in common. You smell a rat?
Well, obviously there's a conflict.
Yeah, and the United States governments are run by the mobs, and they're all in it because they had to do this. This had to happen.
Yeah, that's why nothing becomes of
That's
it.
not
Yeah.
illegal.
Well,
Investors lose money or whatever, and
Environmental Group US
taxpayers
was one of the original
pick up the
partners
tab.
in CLL.
Once again,
And it seems like it's just a changing of the names, and as you change your name, you can avoid responsibility, in my opinion.
I'm not familiar with that corporate chain of events that you described, but if parts of it was reacquired by a new company,
You can
it's
check
still
on
a
the Secretary of State's website.
so
I just wanted to be on the record.
okay.
following
Yeah.
those comments.
well, guess what? She's on the record.
Hickerson clarified that she only represents the Radioactive Control Program, and their obligation is to ensure that a licensee, in this case Colorado Legacy Land, maintains an adequate financial assurance to continue work on a site. But Hickerson's comment, when taken in context with her admission of having no knowledge of Ansero's corporate history, implies that the reason they aren't looking into the transaction between Cotter and CLL and where that money went is because, simply put, it's not their job. And while that may seem reasonable on the surface, the details of that transaction, and even more specifically, how that money was handled by Harrington as both managing director.
Last little bit from this. Because it's
Throughout
not
the
like they didn't
2000s,
know.
Cotter was repeatedly cited for violating dozens of state regulations. For example, in 2000, they were cited for 15 violations, including once again exposing workers to unsafe levels of radioactivity. In 2001, they were cited with 7 violations and ordered to pay out $16.3 million to 32 people who experienced radiation poisoning. In 2002, Cotter was cited with 19 violations, with the state referring to many of these as a, quote, serious and substantial breakdown in management oversight. In 2004, the state of Colorado completed an assessment of the impoundment linings, finding them to be ineffective and, quote, unusable. That same year, Cotter spilled over 1,400 pounds of corrosive chemicals. 2005, Cotter was cited for 6 violations and was criminally charged for spilling 4,500 gallons of solvents which killed 40 geese and ducks. They would eventually plead guilty and were sentenced to pay a $15,000 fine. 2006, Cotter is cited for 7 violations, and the air quality test.
And there, from what I understand from some friends, I don't know if it was Luther or not, that there's people in jail in Kentucky for pot. They've been in jail for 30 years. It's probably worth more. Their time is worth more than 15 grand.
Yeah, the disparity between sentencing, right, and crimes, serious crimes.
Yeah, big time.
It's like a police dog trained to sniff out strange substances, and what we found was, to say the least, jaw-dropping. First off, let's discuss the Edo people of Benin, just to gain some familiarity with these people who we are connecting to ancient Japan. They founded a large kingdom they called Edo, known to the outside world as the Benin Empire or the Benin Kingdom, as early as the 9th century. They were among the various black African ethnic groups who migrated from Egypt, Nubia, and the area now known as the Middle East into West and Central Africa from between roughly 300 BC right up to about 900 AD for various reasons, including increased desertification of the Sahara and foreign invasions by Greeks, Romans, and later on Arabs. Seemingly, literally the first thing the Edo people did when they got to southern Nigeria was to build an absolutely massive wall and military rampart surrounding the entire kingdom, and even separating internal towns and villages, one from the other. Was there a plan to keep out the Arabs and other invaders? If that was the plan, it surely worked, because they went on to thrive and prosper independently, free of foreign invasion for many centuries, right up till 1897, when the British invaded them. According to the UK Guardian newspaper, the Guinness Book of Records 1974 edition described the walls of Benin City and its surrounding kingdom as the world's largest earthworks carried out prior to the mechanical era. According to estimates by the new scientist Fred Pierce, Benin City's walls were at one point 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China and consumed 100 times more material than the Great Pyramid of Khufu in Egypt. Situated on a plain, Benin City was enclosed by massive walls in the south and deep ditches in the north. Beyond the city walls, numerous further walls were erected that separated the surroundings of the capital into around 500 distinct villages. Pierce writes that these walls extended for some 16,000 kilometers in all, in a mosaic of more than 500 interconnected settlement boundaries. They covered 6,500 square kilometers and were all dug by the Edo people. They took an estimated 150 million hours to construct and are perhaps the largest single archaeological phenomenon on the planet.
Did I just hear him say that's the largest single archaeological phenomenon? It's in Africa? 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China for the one town? Wow. Pretty fascinating. Yeah, they're going to tie it. They're going to try to tie it into the Bible. That's why you got to have. Still got your thinking cap on, right, big brother?
They're nearby anyhow.
Okay. Oops, I hit the. I was supposed to hit click 4 seconds ago.
Benin City was also one of the first cities to have a semblance of street lighting. Huge metal lamps, many feet high, were built and placed around the city, especially near the king's palace. Fueled by palm oil, their burning wicks were lit at night to provide illumination for traffic to and from the palace. When the Portuguese first discovered the city in 1485, they were stunned to find this vast kingdom made of hundreds of interlocked cities and villages in the middle of the quote-unquote African jungle. They called it the Great City of Benin. Indeed, they classified Benin City as one of the most beautiful and best planned cities in the world. In 1691, the Portuguese ship captain Lourenço Pinto observed that Great Benin, where the king resides, is larger than Lisbon. All the streets run straight and as far as the eye can see.
Oh, that's just crazy. I'm going to take a second here to. Oh, what was I going to do? I'm going to just type in Starfort Lisbon and see if we get a picture of, their planned city. And also remember, whenever the Bible talks about when they were building the castles and the star forts in the Old Testament, I mean, they were describing these type of buildings. If you do the measurements, I mean, they were building and living in castles. They were occupying star fort cities. So the city in Africa, with its, I think it looks like it has cul-de-sacs and things. It was bigger than this. I wanted to give you an idea. It was big.
Houses are large, especially that of the king, which is richly decorated and has
And
fine
lit
colors.
up.
The city is wealthy and industrious. It is
Keep your ears open. Maybe they didn't have bathrooms.
so well governed that thefts are known, and the people live in such security that they have no doors to their houses. Houses are built
doors?
alongside the streets in good order, the one close to the other, writes the 17th century Dutch visitor Alfred Dapper. Adorned with gables and steps, they are usually broad, with long galleries inside, especially so in the case of the houses of the nobility, and divided into many rooms which are separated by walls made of red clay, very well erected. Wealthy residents kept these walls as shiny and smooth by washing and rubbing as any wall in Holland can be made with chalk, and they're like mirrors. The upper stories are made of the same sort of clay. And regarding the world-famous Benin bronzes, the Guardian writes that, at the height of its greatness in the 12th century, well before the start of the European Renaissance, the kings and nobles of Benin City patronized craftsmen and lavished them with gifts and wealth in return for their depiction of the kings and dignitaries'
Wow.
great exploits in intricate.
I would be casting some aluminum, Lord willing, here in a couple of weeks in my sculpture class. And I mean, it's a production, even if you want to just cast a pound of aluminum. In my mind, I don't understand how they could sand cast such large amounts of bronze. It's crazy. Our whole world is a lie. And, we're trying to get it to go back to some Leave It to Beaver world and act like, well, that was good. Well, yeah. Blacks couldn't be in the movies or play baseball or drink at the water fountains or vote until 1964 when Leave It to Beaver finally got its last couple of color seasons. These things just happen, Randy, and this is what's on my heart. Oh, yeah. Yeah, see what happened here is now I missed it. All these black people from that city ended up in Japan somehow. Their haplogroups and all of their, see what they're doing is they're showing Japan and Africa. It's weird. So this is what kind of made me think maybe RJ can figure it out.
With a grand history and all manner of capacity for that era. At this point, we must mention that what we found in our research actually connects Japan to many African languages from Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, Zambia, and even Mauritania, signifying that there was a very ancient
Look at that guy. It's like looking in the mirror.
When there was
I even have that necklace.
Lingua franca,
too long. I
perhaps
don't wear it very
Jumbo
much.
Hindu people, Japan's earliest inhabitants who came from Africa and later intermarried
hat.
with Mongoloids and had replaced the original African population of
that's your
small
black
negritos
aristocracy.
that had populated the entire earth, including Japan, before any other group of people. In addition, the early Japanese historians themselves have described for us the black barbarians of the South, who, in an age which antedates authentic history, came from the South in ships and settled in Japan. These immigrants mingled and amalgamated one with another and with the natives, and in time became a homogeneous race.
They got married to one another, Randy. They amalgamated. They sound like, there is a science experiment.
Whose predominating physical characteristics bespeak the unmistakable presence of a large...
They were in
legal
love
element.
and they got married,
The
They
Ainus
amalgamated
dominated
with
Japan until a
each
group of
other.
warriors known as the Yayoi arrived around 300 BC and conquered them. Till today, the origins of the Yayoi people is still disputed. No Japanese account identifies Yayoi as coming from any part of Asia. And Yayoi is actually an Ainu term for invaders. Were these invaders African? We think so. Mainstream
No. You want to talk, and the United States got a shameful history of eugenics, but Japan hates blacks so much more than we do. I mean, if you read some of the stuff that they've written and the way that they actually feel, and their word for Africa is black continent. I mean, they hate this. They hate this coming out right now. Japan wanted to be white so bad. They almost won World War II by themselves, and they're a pretty small country, man.
Well, yeah, an island.
Yeah, not even that. I mean, yeah, they got one kind of big island, but the rest of them, shoot, that's like Gilligan's Island, or that small, maybe not that small, but they do look alike.
research usually refers to the Yayoi as having arrived Asia on ships from quote-unquote elsewhere.
Yep.
They never say where
Tartaria.
elsewhere. But there also seems to be a much more recent injection of a profound African influence.
What?
And all evidence points to the West African nation of Nigeria as being the source of that influence. And we're talking perhaps just a little over 600 to 1,000 years ago.
Just because there's a town of Edo in Nigeria, that's one weak connection.
The Edo period of Japan lasted from 1603 to 1867.
Oh.
It began when Tokugawa Ieyasu became an elite military commander or shogun in 1603 after a victory at Sekigahara in 1600 and brought 200 years of stability and peace and prosperity to Japan. The name Ieyasu is a stunning link to the same
I
name.
could make a better
given to
one
top
than that
Benin
out of
military
wood. I don't
commanders.
think they tried very
The
hard.
Iyase of Benin is regarded as second in command of the Benin military after the Oba. Here we can see an actual ancient sculpture of an Iyase military commander. According to the Met Museum, New York, who published the image, during the 15th century reign of Oba Eware, Benin's armies were formed and the fortification of its capital with a massive wall undertaken. In parallel,
Okay. The Wikipedia didn't make they made it look like they weren't real walls and stuff, kind of, cartoony.
delegations of Portuguese traders assiduously sought to secure exclusive commercial treaties with this leader of the region's most powerful polity.
Oh
For
man,
many-
look at that's embarrassing, right? Honkies bowing before a black guy. They must have been tricking them. I would check those treasures for smallpox. I'm just trying to be provocative,
Mm-hmm.
but I would.
500 years, Benin's independent leaders firmly established the
I
terms of
wanted to say, how come they've even got me convinced that they couldn't have been the Olmec, of traveling around with, because they look like that too, because in our minds, the Olmec, well, that was 10,000 years before the Aztecs and the Mayans. Well, maybe not, because let's keep that in our mind. They kind of look Olmecish.
of engagement with Portuguese, Dutch, and French agents and effectively represented their own interests. So the Benin Empire, which exchanged ambassadors with Portugal, by the way, in the 1500s, was a thriving, formidable, wealthy power in West Africa with a standing army of 200,000, half of them cavalry, and it absolutely was not beyond them to ship bands of troops to Asia. Regarding the Edo period of Japan, which is the focus of our discussion, here's what Japanese author Fujita Midori wrote in his epic work titled the presence of black people in Japan during the Edo period. For Africa, the catalogue depicted couples labelled as belonging to the regions of Kafuri, Guinea, Loren, and Ahirika. As both Java and Monomotapa are located in the tropics, the Korobo have black skin and very curly hair, and their eyes and noses are completely different from those of the Japanese people. The presence of a black person in Watuchinke, along with the Japanese, Chinese, Dutch, and Koreans, though the latter two only appear in conversations between the former two Asian groups, presents the concept of internationalism that cover the three traditional continents and races.
Huh.
And as early as 1889, an association to preserve Edo culture had been established in Tokyo. It claims that the Tokugawa period.
I would ask people, be patient. I know this doesn't tie into the United States right now and our troubles with people coming in to take your land. It's not really your land, and you kind of paying rent on it, and there's set up by a government $34 trillion in debt, but somehow your 401k is going to make it. I just want people to start thinking about that the two groups of people are my brothers and sisters in the Lord and everybody else, Randy, and it's every tongue, every tribe that are part of our brothers and sisters. And as the judgment continues, and the worst fear of most other Christians is that they'll have to go through that what they know everyone else deserves, and that's the judgment. And they've been taught they're going to escape it, and that's what they want. That's what they want. They want the escape. What am I trying to get across to them, Randy? What am I trying to? Can you sum it up?
But implying that if you get raptured, you're gonna avoid the hardship.
Well, they all know that. I've had people that wanted the rapture so much they voted for Bill Clinton just to hurry it up because they wanted to leave.
Well, I don't get that. Yeah, I've heard the art, but I don't follow that line of it sounds great, but that doesn't sound biblical to me.
Not even a little bit. Not even a little bit, because in a few short years or months or who knows, there's going to be a point of where people are going to be going like, okay, we're in a safe place. Hey, there's somebody coming. Is he black? Yeah, shoot him. Because we are gunned up and ready to go, man. And there are people who have been trained in Call of Duty and first shooter games, horror films, that they know one thing to do: eliminate anything that looks scary or different.
Yeah, my opinion on the rapture, when it did happen, it was after the judgment. It was after Christ returned and Armageddon, and then those that may have survived it and were worthy were raptured, but not until those that had perished for what they had believed were taken first.
They're the overcomers, they're called.
Yeah, but to think that there's some sort of pre-rescue, I don't think that ever happened.
Endure, overcome until the end.
Right. Correct.
Yeah, and we'll figure out who the rest of the dead and everything else are, but that doesn't negate the fact that here we are dealing with it. And I invite people to deal with this.
I.e. the Edo period was the period in which Japanese civilization achieved its greatest progress and development. Also, researchers have noted that recent DNA studies corroborate these connections. A new genetic study suggests that the Japanese are more mixed.
I could also remind people there's an argument about this same time period. The Jesuits invaded Japan, and Japan in that same Indo period opened up to trade, and then, things, went bad from there. So it's we can't go down the whole Black Hebrew route of so there we just proved, the blacks the tribe of Judah blacks are the best. No, there's no good guys. There is no best. There are people like us that have been saved for no apparent reason, but we are going to accept that salvation, love our adopted father, and never stop admiring Jesus Christ, the example of the perfect, obedient big brother, obeying his righteous, what is right and true unto death. By his stripes we're healed. The whole, you either understand that or you don't, they don't. I guess they're going to prove that they're related.
With Africans than other East Asians. There is a connection between the Y DNA chromosomes. In DNA, haplogroups are families or lineages that descend from a common ancestor. Over centuries or millennia, they could number millions and billions and even have a different skin color from their forebears. But the DNA haplogroup is what identifies them, says what lineage you're from, where your great-great-granddaddy came from. Japanese and Africans share similar Y DNA called the Y DNA haplogroup DE. The Japan-specific Y DNA haplogroup is D and is a descendant of the African Y DNA haplogroup DE, which has been found in West Africa. The Japanese also have some cultural practices that are rather similar or reminiscent of Edo practices. Shintoism, so-called ancestor worship, very similar to what operates with the Edo people. Shintoism, Japan's main religion, is all about shrines, ancestors, mountain spirits, tree spirits, the so-called heathen religions that were used to justify the colonization of Africans. Japanese festivals and dressing are also remarkably African in color.
It sounds like what the lost tribes of Israel would have been doing, and Judah joined in on for a while. So their clothes do look similar, I guess.
So why do modern Japanese look different from Edos and Africans? The likelihood is that most of the band of Edo settlers from Benin would have been men who simply married into the female population of their new Asian settlement and thereby eventually blended in with the dominant light skin tones.
I've seen that picture. Funny. Still looks weird. You ever been around one of those like guys that's like a basketball player, 7'8"? They're big, man. It's crazy.
Oh yeah. I've been around some tall people, and they dominate.
They're big. Even Noah Church was 6'9" or something like that, and he was just huge.
Hence, we see quite a lot of Edo period figures who appear to be of mixed race.
Same pictures you can see in the United States.
Conquered Japan, took women of the conquered people for wives, concubines, and over time, their offspring looked exactly like
there's
the
this
dominant
guy, I think he tries to tie it a little more into the Bible.
Some lived in the Red City of Petra, the capital of the Nabatean territory in Edom, modern Jordan. The Greeks called the Edomites the Idumea, or red people, which we must add here reflects the red costume always worn in Benin ceremonial outfits.
So is this narrator implying some sort of
very much a biblical connection?
Well, not so much like a natural loyalty.
No, just that, just in all of the shuffling of everything from Babylon, that somehow some ancient Israelites ended up over there, and he's trying to tie it in. That it seemed like a very plausible thing according to the Bible that could have happened. I don't know. Maybe that's
Abraham's father was called Terah. Terah was a royal name associated with the Ainu of the Upper Nile. These spread as far as Japan, where only about 300 pure-blooded Ainu still remain on the island of Hokkaido. The original name of Tokyo was Edo. Among the Ainu, Terah means priest. Abraham's father was Terah, a ruler, priest, whose territory along the Tigris River extended between Ur and Haran. The Edomites of the Bible are related to the Edo or Idu of Nigeria and Benin. The title of their rulers is further evidence. The ruler of the Edo is called Oba, and the first ruler of Petra was the deified Nabatean king Obodas. The Edomites, along with the Jebusites, appear to have belonged to the Horite Confederation, which originated in the Upper Nile region. This is the homeland of Abraham's ancestors and is called Cush in Genesis 10. From ancient Kush, the people spread in many directions. Some live today in Nigeria and Benin as the Edo or Idu. And we ask, did some head from Kush to the East African coast and sail to Asia and Japan? Likewise, the biblical Jebusites have living descendants in Nigeria. They're called the Ijebu, and they're just next door to Benin in Nigeria today.
Yeah, see, we got to go back to believing in that this is really ancient Israel. So, I'm not all on board with all of this, Randy. To me, it's just more things to process as I take a night off from, warning people not to trust people who want them to go to the Jules Verne, Hollow Earth, North Pole, or any other nonsense that, Atlantis, we've gone from everything from the blood over intent, which I think was about, 2018. That's when they first came out with the idea that if you wrote a letter, asking God to forgive you and everything else in blood, went to the North Pole and threw it in there, you'd be forgiven. That was called blood over intent. I'm not sure if that was more than a fad, but there's always something where you got to go to the North Pole. I didn't want to talk about it all night tonight, so I'm only mentioning it now. Welcome, Montana, Fred, a couple of new names I'm seeing. I must have did some cussing earlier. I do apologize. I've been trying a lot harder on that. Not always succeeding, but so that's where we're at on that kind of stuff. So Lisbon was big. Japan's weird. I'm not ready to go down the full Black Hebrew roots movement, but that's a pretty recent thing too with what's the name Jeremiah Wright mean to you?
Well, I believe he was kind of the head guy where Obama attended
a church.
Yeah.
Claimed to get a church, got a tax write-off.
I would think whatever the 503c.
Right. That was that, and that's a whole controlled opposition. Malcolm X found out that, like I found out that the Christian homeschool movement was set up by preterist believing Jesuits. And when I started questioning the history that we were shoving down the throat of everyone that, that's how I got rich, was people were throwing money at us to sell them, copyright free books that we just punched up and changed, make America look more Christian, make America look more like a light on the hill. And we're the only people teaching children how to use phonics and do math. So they were the only people capable of working for the government, and they were brainwashed into America, right or wrong, my country, right or wrong. And I couldn't put up with it. And later on, the Lord, by my second vision, showed me why. And it was that the stones were going to cry out, that the end was coming, that this was the last generation, and that the mud flood was Armageddon. And here we are. And so I was going to make another video about that tonight. And I did. It's been about an hour now. We could keep going. We could make it an hour and a half, but our deal isn't going to change. We're the group. We're the ones that, even with all that talk about the predestination and election, if you don't make a choice to get on your knees, it's all for naught. All that calling and predestinating was for someone else. If they can't do that one thing, Randy, and that is that everyone that's part of that forgive group admits they were sinners, given enough power and time and money, they would be as evil as anybody else. There wasn't going to be a happy ending where they were perfect. They were always going to need forgiven. And I knew it. You knew it when you heard it. Some people don't. They don't get it. They will never admit they're wrong. Never. And that seems so unreal to us that it's hard to imagine that they don't think they need to be forgiven.
Well, it is fairly humbling when you come to that conclusion that the only thing you're bringing to the table is your filth. Yeah, I can compete with Paul as far as his claim to being chief of sinners. I think.
Well, you weren't the famous Randy for nothing. And you know what Randy means in most other countries. They know, and that's what it meant for you.
Well, I didn't pick my name, just like I didn't choose my parents and any of it, or where I was raised. And
right, it's what men did at the time.
And as far as what got me to where I am today, I'm not certain how much I had to do with it, but yeah, there are choices along the way that.
But wouldn't you agree that when I first heard the gospel, it was almost irresistibly to me that it was like, what? There's a chance to be forgiven, and that's what's shocking is that other people they're going like, wait. He can't die for you. And we think, yes, he can. Yes, he can.
Yeah, when it comes to imitation, that's where the substitutional atonement, that works for me.
Amen. And that's what the two words they hate, substitutional atonement. They want it all to be, why me? Oh, I know that.
But other than that, I prefer genuine over, fake or, but yeah, that's the real deal, the gospel. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then let's move on. Here's another one. You have your thinking cap on, and everyone else has their thinking cap on. Here's the question. Just got asked 8 months ago.
You may have never noticed, but the lack of a German mafia is a curious gap in American history, as logically it definitely should exist. You see, between 1840 and 1890, the Germans were the largest single ethnic group immigrating to the United States. For over 50 years, millions of Germans washed ashore in New York and Boston like algae overgrowing a warm lake. Indeed, during several key battles of the U.S. Civil War, native Germans speaking zero English filled out entire...
I have to tell you, though, as a writer, that guy nailed it. The moss coming over a green lake.
It's fairly vivid.
Yeah, it was.
Lake. Indeed, during several key battles of the U.S. Civil War, native Germans speaking zero English filled out entire regiments in the Union Army. The 52nd of New York, 9th of Iowa, and 74th Pennsylvania, to name just a few. So vast were the waves of German bodies crashing on America's shores every year that of approximately 516,000 Union soldiers, 200,000 were born in the German Confederation. And
I might have stepped on that first part, but what he was saying that all of those big, divisions did not speak a word of English for the Union. And 200,
apparently it wasn't necessary.
No, you didn't need it.
After the war, it did not stop. Between 1880 and 1890, another 1,500,000 Germans immigrated to the US, by this time forcing the Garfield administration to grapple assimilating the largest share of foreign-born people in the United States in her entire history. And only 3 years later, by 1893, over 800 German-language journals were being printed in the United States every month. It may seem hard to believe now, but more Germans fled Europe for America than Irish and Italians combined. By 1930, 1 in 10 US citizens were German Americans, and mafias had spread their roots deep into American society. See,
Dang, is this crazy or what, Randy? That's just
Well,
insane. Hey, Victoria. Hi.
well, it sounds legitimate to me. It's to believe it. It may sound, skewed, but it probably isn't.
Check this one out. Maybe we can get to this some other time when Randy is ready, more ready. But right now, I
True
want people.
confessions? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I want people to think about what he's going to talk about. Maybe the Germans didn't need a mafia because I don't know. I'm not ready to put white people on the tribe of Dan, but we can get talked into believing. Just give us a cause and we'll fight with you to the death. Are we that gullible? I think so. I really think so. I mean, because you can get trained, intelligent people, and they hear something and this and that, and they're stopping you from going to the North Pole. Well, they could kiss my grits. I'm going to the North Pole. Only a honky. Only a honky. Only white people that don't get mafias that just think everything's going to be okay because I can pull myself up by my bootstraps. You can't save yourself, and this world is going to hell soon. That's why that's why they didn't have a mafia. Everybody else give it. Randy's testimony. We've got to start fresh. We're an hour in. We can't go over that right now.
at the dawn of the 20th century, there were many lucrative mafias, including the Cosa Nostra, Italian, the Kosher Nostra, Jewish, the Hudson Mobsters, Irish, the Purple Gang, Jewish, West Side Mob.
But I'm not going to let it go one more minute, though. But ever since I've known Randy, and for the last 30, 40 years, he's the guy that when he knew the truth, he resigned from the church school that he was on the board of, and his children had went to, and for the name of Jesus Christ has given up everything. So whatever his testimony was, it was.
And the infamous.
Not is.
All I can say is you may have to catch the reruns in eternity on that one.
Yeah.
Despite vast, overwhelming immigration and a shared sense of cultural identity, or language at least, the Germans never developed a mafia in the United States. Why? Well, the answer is unclear. It's never been studied. ChatGPT won't give you a good answer. However, from our investigation,
can't be trusted anyway.
Can be divided into two categories. During the 19th century, when millions of German speakers were traveling to the New World, the majority were Southern Germans from rural farms, while a minority were Northern German political exiles, like the 48ers. And once they arrived in the US, rather than settling in port cities...
Now, when I was working my way up, before I was an administrator at Christian Liberty, there was a man named Al Benson. He had a wife named Gina, a son named Paul, and a daughter that I can't remember. But he was so into the 48ers, and that was the German intelligentsia that brought socialism to the United States, and he could prove it.
In New York and Boston, like their European comrades, they instead chose to move largely west of the Appalachians.
That would have been
Germans chose
1988.
farming in newly created states like Ohio, Indiana, and Wisconsin.
They're 1888.
Early Germans to live
Well, I
largely
didn't.
excluded from America's
I knew
newly
Al
developed
Benson in
industrial
Oh,
1988.
in 19, yeah, okay, 19,
Yeah.
yeah.
So some of this stuff, preterism seems so right to me for so long, but it's the Lord's timing. You can't go telling him, hey, schedule me for a vision to change my life this day at that time. It doesn't work like that. Man, that city was, could have been good. Maybe it was good.
Life. And as the Germans primarily worked on large farms, it meant new German immigrants lived large physical distances from other German immigrants. And this trend continued well into the 1900s, until many rural towns were primarily German-speaking and culturally Protestant. A map of demographics in 2023 shows how this unique German migration pattern birthed and primarily shaped what we now call the American Midwest, a region culturally distinct from other parts of America. While Irish and Italian Americans densely
Look at this
clustered
part
around
where they
Boston,
show
and Russian
Wisconsin,
Jews set up in
Illinois.
New York and later Florida, Germans at the time chose to spread
It's
thinly
all
over a
German.
vast area of the Republic. And this decentralized life made it less likely a family or families could seize power and set up a centralized economic structure like the mafia.
A scene from
Additionally, because Germans, compared to other Europeans, earned their living from farming and rural trade far away from the epicenter of American industry, it's likely they didn't experience the extreme levels of discrimination their Irish and Italian brothers did, like being cut out of labor jobs. Therefore, they likely felt less of a necessity to organize into hierarchies like the Italians and Irish did in order to open illicit businesses where they could earn a living in the city and provide for their families, in the more libertarian markets like gambling, drug running, prostitution, and racketeering. But finally, the total lack of a German mafia.
We'll just take a second to remind everybody that all of those German towns that built their kit towns and we, are left, they all have a Freemasonic lodge to where you get a tap on the shoulder and, hey, you want to join our lodge? Everybody, well, this guy's in it. That, yeah, I'll join it. And the next thing you know, you're taking a blood oath vow of death. And people underestimate that, Randy. Crazy, right?
Yeah, at a time where vows are
Do you really need? Yeah. Do you really need a mafia when you've made a vow that they'll kill you if you ever tell on them? And everybody was in the Freemasons or the Odd Fellows, and they all took those vows, man. That's documented history. Who are these people anyway? The only one I recognize is the Bankman-Fried.
Yeah. His mug's been around.
As outside Chicago, all major American cities during the Gilded Age were located on the East Coast. And since metropolitan life took place far away from the heartland, what nefarious activities did occur 1,000 miles away on the Great Lakes or Great Plains were of little concern to the
That's another one of those names, Randy, because that crooked bankman, I think, got freed after a couple of months in jail for stealing billions.
Let alone the wealthy, the automobile, telephone, or radio.
Oh, I know. Everybody was waiting for that girl's dress to blow up. We've seen that clip a million times.
As at the time, these institutions existed mainly in large cities, where the Irish, Italians, Jews were already attracting focus and operating. Indeed, almost as a corollary to the millions of poor Germans settling in the Midwest, the rich and educated Germans did prefer the cities. People like Albert Einstein, Fritz Lang, Marlene Dietrich, Hans Hofmann, Walter Kroppus, Kurt Weill, Franz Boas, Max Weber. Again, however, these German immigrants faced less discrimination to earning a living, as they were able to write or teach for a living.
Tell us about the
12 million
Jews.
German immigrants lived in the U.S., and some 1 in 500 were active members of the German-American Bund. The Bund is a national organization that supported Adolf Hitler and pledged allegiance to the new Reich. And on a crisp day in October 1938, many American Nazis marched excitedly to a rally on New York's Upper East Side, the heart of the historic German town in New York City. After the American Bund Nazi rally finished, members gathered into a swastika-laden ballroom to hear Albert Kuhn, a fervent Hitler supporter, deliver what would have been, I'm sure, a pathos-invoking speech. But it never happened.
No.
According to news reports.
So the Jews came to the rescue and beat them up.
A Mr. Mayor Lansky and his Jewish gangster friends, along with a group called Murder Inc., quietly arrived at the rally. broke into 3 groups and surrounded the building.
I
As Coon
remember
gathered
Meyer
his men to
Lansky
give his
is
talk,
5
5
foot
Jewish
4
gangsters entered the ballroom's
23
second floor,
pounds.
while 5 more waited outside with pool cues and baseball bats. In the back of the room, Mr. Lansky and his Jewish men entered, listened briefly to the Nazi speech, and then unleashed mayhem. A first-hand witness of the event said men who knew how to march were fighting men who knew how to hurt. Quickly scattered about lay injured Nazis everywhere. Some lay unconscious from being pummeled in the head. The gangsters' only agreement with the New York police was apparently not to kill anyone, a goal they only barely accomplished. After beating one Boone member semi-conscious, members of Murder Inc. tossed the man out a second.
Well, somehow, after the Jewish mafia kicked their ass, the Nazis did come back pretty strong in 1958, got put in charge of NASA, a lot of banks, a lot of universities that had still been taking nude photos of every freshman that came into an Ivy League school since 1917. It can't get any more weird, man. Yeah. Oh, see, there you go. QB should be on here teaching. So that's about it, man. I got let's see what else we had here. I had just a couple more pictures of oops. What the mercy, Baku? I'm glad they're not seeing what I had the screen all messed up. All right. So they have these big cities in Africa. Pretty soon, what I'm telling you is we don't know the Olmecs were in Japan. We know they lie about what's going on with Africa, but that doesn't mean the Black Hebrew roots people are right. And, you know, because we think we're right. And that's about it. And really, that's an hour and 17 minutes. Big day, a lot going on. I don't feel like I had to, you know, I don't want to get after Thayer and Paul and these other knuckleheads tonight. So I just want people to realize that this judgment is on. Your computers are listening to you. If you haven't been around for a while and you wonder, what do you mean water is waiting to judge us? Well, water has a memory, and we're all water. The dry ground is an anomaly in the world of water separated by water. The truth is Scripture alone. We cannot worry about the ones who are, no matter what we do, they will never have their heart changed by what we do. Their heart is going to be changed by God, saved by grace. They will be like we were, or it won't happen. And the Scripture tells us that everyone's going to be judged fairly. Everyone is going to have no argument and say, yes, you're right. And I'll guarantee when you see that light, you will understand it's perfection. That's just the way it's going to be. There's 2 groups of people. And one group right now, to finally fulfill the last prophecy of Scripture, can be that generation that with me will beat their swords into a plowshare. Because the last thing I think the government wanted was people, you know, like me and others that are out there that haven't been changed, that are going to fight them when their government struggles and people start asking the hard questions like, how are we going to pay off $34 trillion in debt? And our rivers are overflowing. Our infrastructure is breaking down. There's yellow clay that's been strategically planted everywhere on this Flat Earth Nation. And I'm about to close the show. Do you have anything to say, Mr. Randy?
The sheep against the goats.
Yeah, so I would always advise the sheep to run away. Run away. Get some trained sheep that, could fight if they wanted to, but now use their skills to protect. And, every time they want to show up and spend money to fight, we're gone, because we'll have a maze of tunnels to work in. God will have a people, and they won't be waiting at the North Pole. Not on this Flat Earth Nation. Not because we know the golden age has passed, but because we study the Bible. That's how we can tell you confidently the mud flood was Armageddon. And that's why we'll never tell you anything else about eschatology, except we'll flesh that out. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho. Aloha. Arrivederci. Ciao.